Well, hello to my Sunday school friends. It is nice to see you. I hope that you are well. I want you to remember back a few weeks, we talked about King Ahaziah. Remember this guy? He was the guy that fell through the lattice, the fencing in his house and was badly injured. And he sent some of his servants to the prophets of Baal, the priests of Baal, to ask whether or not he'd recover. And on the way, they ran into Elijah. And Elijah said, is there no God in Israel that you're sending people to Baal? But thus saith the Lord, the king will never recover. He will never leave his bed. He will surely die. So if you don't remember that, you should go back and listen to that story, because it's a pretty good one. And you can find all these stories, on the website. So anyway, after Ahaziah died, there was a question of who would be the next ruler of Israel. And Ahaziah had children, but they were all very young. One of his children was a guy named Joash, who was just 1 year old when his dad died. Now, Ahaziah's mom wanted to be queen. She had no blood right to be queen. She wasn't of Israel. She wasn't of any royal line, but she wanted to be queen. And when her son died, she knew that the only way she could set herself up as queen would be to kill all of her own grandchildren, if you can imagine that. To just destroy the entire line, Ahaziah, her son's entire line, and then, seize the throne and hold on to it with both hands, and maybe she could ride it out and she'd be queen. So that's what she did. Now, she got most of her grandchildren, but the little boy, Joash, he was hidden away. He was hidden away first by his nurse, and then he was brought to the temple, and he was hidden in the temple for 6 years. Now, when Joash was 7 years old, the high priest said, it's time. I mean, obviously a 7-year-old can't really be a king, but the longer they waited for the evil queen to lose her grip on power, the stronger she got. And so it's time. So the high priest sent out messages to all of the tribes and all of the priests and all of the Levites. And he said, I want you to gather with me in Jerusalem at the temple. We've got a king, a son of David, a descendant of David, one of Ahaziah's sons. Wow. Everyone gathered. This was good news. They didn't like the queen. They knew she was a monster. Anyone who'll kill their own grandchildren is a monster. And so everyone gathered at the temple, and the high priest brought little Joash out and showed him this little 7-year-old boy. And he said, Hail, son of David, son of Ahaziah, the rightful king of Israel. And all the people were so excited that they could throw this monstrous, wicked queen overboard and have a good king who was part of the promise that God had made to David's family. But how do you do it exactly? So the high priest said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to keep all of the priests here who would ordinarily be going home. When the new ones come, the new Levites come, we're going to have just an enormous amount of people. We're going to take up arms, right? Spears, swords, shields. We're going to divide ourselves into 3 parts. Some parts of us are going to watch the doorway, the gateway into the temple. Others are going to surround the new king here in the temple, and some are going to surround the royal palace. Well, that sounded like a plan. So as soon as they could put it together, they brought the little boy out in front of these people, right? They anointed him as king. They put oil on his head. We've talked about that before with King David. And we've talked about how, Jesus is the Messiah, the anointed one. But they poured oil on his head, and then all the people cheered and shouted, Yay, long live the king! Well, the queen heard all the commotion. And she ran to the temple with her guards, but she found all of these priests and all of these Levites were armed and waiting for her. She ran in and she called, treason, treason, treason. Treason is when you disobey the government in an illegal fashion. And she wanted people to arrest and kill little Joash. She didn't read the crowd very well. The crowd was sick of her. They were delighted to have a king that was part of the right family. And so the high priest ordered that the queen be seized. He said, don't kill her here in the temple. Take her outside of the town and do away with her. Give her the same penalty that she gave her grandchildren. And that's exactly what happened. And then all of these priests and Levites, they brought little Joash down to the king's palace, and they put him on his throne, and he began to reign as king. Now, 7-year-olds don't know anything, so he had advisors and helpers, and the high priest helped him. And the whole time the high priest was alive, Joash was a good king. He wound up reigning for 40 years. And while that old high priest that had saved him was alive, he was a good king. He got married a couple of times, he had a bunch of kids, and we will pick up the story there down the road. But just remember that God had made a promise to David that his descendants would sit on the throne. God kept that promise, and not even the most wicked, evil grandmother in the whole world could undo those promises. You take care. Bye-bye.